dying to get going. Deputy Superintendent Stallings then will cover our general session legislative preparation. Thank you, and Policy Director Connell as well. Thank you both. And I'm not sure if I'm getting your title right. I keep botching things, Greg. Sorry.
Analyst, but director is
Program
an
analyst.
upgrade, so no worries.
We just,
Well, no problem, Chair Moss. Thank you so much. And the good news is the first thing I'm going to do is introduce myself and policy analyst Greg Cannell. So I'm Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy. I'm happy to be here today and super excited about the legislative session. Hopefully my excitement and energy will pass on to all of you. The session begins next week. So I'm going to introduce our policy team to you so you'll know and you'll get to know them more over the coming weeks. So as was already mentioned, Greg Cannell is USBE policy analyst. He will be presenting to you all every Thursday. Along with me will be the two who will be covering and bills and informing you on those bills on Thursdays. Also, in the back of the room, Liz, if you could stand up. Liz Bernfeld is our legislative intern for the 2023 legislative session. She's welcome, Liz. She is a current PhD student at BYU in educational inquiry, measurement, and evaluation. So we are delighted to have her joining us this session, so you'll get to know her more as well. Thanks, Liz. And then also I wanted to remind you all that yesterday I sent an email to the board with the link to a USBE legislative session overview. That is video is approximately 35 minutes long. And because of that video, we're not going to take time today to go through the basics of some of the things that video covers are what a typical session looks like, how a bill becomes a law, how to read a bill, how to track a bill, and you can create your own account and actually populate a list of bills that you'd like to, and you can even receive email messages when the status or amendments are made public on those bills, how to participate in a virtual committee meeting, and those are the topics that the video covers. And so we hope you'll be able to take time to look at that at your convenience. And then if you do have any other questions, because I know you had a lot of materials to review in preparation to today's meeting, feel free to reach out to me, Greg, and we'd be happy to answer any questions after you have an opportunity to watch the video. And I'll keep going. Next, quickly, we're just going to show you a couple things. On our USBE website, there's a scrolling banner. One of the scrolling banner items is a legislative session. If you click on that banner, it'll take you to our landing page. Most of the links on here actually direct you to the legislature's website, which is a fabulous website, fairly user-friendly. At the very bottom of this page, you'll see a USBE tracking sheet. That tracking sheet, we update, it's at the very bottom. Oh, it's to the right on yours. I apologize. When I was looking at it today, for some reason, it might be how my my laptop is formatting, but it showed up on the bottom of my page, but it's to the right. And we populate this or repost on our website about twice a week before the session starts. And then once the session starts, this tracking sheet will be posted daily, generally at about 11 a.m. So if you ever want to look at the bills we're tracking, a lot of the information here might be in addition to what you can find on the legislature's website. For example, there is information about the fiscal analysts. On some bills, we'll be populating that more as we go, but you might find some information about what our staff submitted as far as the fiscal impact. Then next, Greg, if you could go to the legislature's website, just briefly wanted to remind you all, again, you're going to have that video, but you can create your own tracking sheet. If you go to bills, one of the first thing you'll see there kind of in the middle bottom is a link to tracking your bills. The way to get in there is you just type a bill into the search bar and it'll populate. And then Greg, if you could stay on the main page. The other thing I would just direct your attention to, if you go down, right under the calendar, there's a lot of great links there to different items on the website. One of the things I like to look at are the new bills. So if you click on that new bills tab, it's a really easy way to quickly see what was numbered over the last 1 or 2 days. And oftentimes there might be something that's non-educational that might grab your attention. So that's just a great resource there. So the last two things I'll cover are the legislative Thursday meetings and then the USBE shuttle. So we'll be meeting up at the Capitol every Thursday from 12 to 1:30, I think is the scheduled time. We're going to be in the Senate building, which is the east building, right next to the public parking lot on the east side on the second floor, Senate Room 210. To help you get up to the Capitol, especially on Thursdays, we do have a USBE shuttle. And as we get closer to next week, I believe Sybil will be sending out information on some of those logistics. For example, we have a dedicated phone we have various people in the agency who will be driving that shuttle. But what that means to you is you can come here, park at USBE, and then take the shuttle up to the Capitol. That shuttle runs approximately 8 to 4 p.m. And on Thursdays, they will have 2 drivers and 2 vans available to get board members up for the Thursday legislative meetings. So that is something that's really helpful. You'll see that during the session, that noon hour time, even the morning time, it can be difficult to find parking up near the Capitol. And I think that's all that I was going to share. And now, if we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. And again, if you have time later on to watch the video and you have questions that you'd like to ask, please feel free to reach out to either of us. We're happy to help. And you also have Kelsey, who can be a great resource and you could reach out to as well.
Thank you very much, Deputy Stallings. I see Member Bogus.
Thank you very much. I just want to know, what's the cycle time on your shuttle? Every 15 minutes, every 20? I didn't fully understand that.
Now this is from my experience. It usually, once it leaves here, it takes about 10 to 15 minutes to get there and 10 to 15 minutes to get back. So I'd say 30 minutes. And we haven't in the past necessarily had a certain time, except for generally we know that 7:45 is a pretty regular time to leave here. And then we do text the shuttle driver. So a good thing to do, if you know you'd like to use the shuttle, would be to send text the day before and say, I plan to go up to Public Education Appropriations Subcommittee meeting, and so I would like to be be up there by 8 o'clock, and then the shuttle driver can get back. Oh, and
That was my Thank you.
Member Davis?
Yeah, and the board had previously voted to have these meetings virtually. So are we going to vote again, or what's going on there? And the other question is, if we are going to move them to in-person, is there an opportunity for board members to participate virtually? Only just because I had planned on I need to participate virtually the first 2, but could rearrange if this is the new direction we're going to go.
Deputy Stallings, we've been exploring that. Do you want to address that?
Yes. So when we are up at the Capitol, unfortunately, we don't have the technology that's here in this building that we can take up. And the traveling technology that our staff do have access to takes about an hour or so to set up. And we do not have access to those committee meeting rooms prior to essentially noon or just before noon, because the legislature uses that room for their own committee meetings. And so we are currently pursuing to see if there's a possibility that the legislature would allow their staff to support our meetings. If that can't happen, what we would do, and I'm trying to remember if you, Board Member Davis, I think you were there when we used to do them on the Hill, what your option would be then would be to call in by phone, and you could listen and you could speak, ask questions kind of over the phone, and everybody would hear your voice, but it wouldn't be a virtual hybrid meeting like what we have here where you see people and where they can see us. It won't be quite like that. It would be calling in by phone would be probably the only option we'd have.
Right.
That's unfortunate. Thanks.
Well-
But maybe what we could, maybe for the first couple, while they work on that, is we could have the meetings here, and then you could have the,
So the current status, I guess, in relation to necessary votes, we've been exploring all this, we haven't pinned it down. Do we need, the status as voted on the board was to be virtual from the Hill or from here? Yeah, but I mean, those who are somewhere would be here in the virtual. I'm just getting clarification from Sybil. I think the vote previously was,
I don't,
it wasn't taken in a board meeting. It was taken in a survey. So that could be some of the
Okay.
confusion.
wasn't a formal vote. It was
Correct.
a survey and then
Correct.
leadership took action to
Yeah.
try to line it up. Okay.
I mean, however we move forward, it's just nice to have some options and
Yeah.
flexibility if we
Got it.
are going to make a change away from the way the board had voted.
Yeah, okay. I think we're still following up. It seems like the best option is to be able to be up there, but also virtual. And we're just trying to arrange through the legislature to make that happen, right? That's the last. And I was looking into that. I think a couple others were. So, okay. But that seems to be what we need to make happen somehow. Any other, Member Lear?
Could you add to your discussions the proposal that Member Davis made that because there, I don't know if there are more than one person, but at least somebody had arranged their schedule to have it virtual and could accommodate if it were here for 2 meetings or 1 meeting or something like that? Because I've experienced it to be very important to have all board members
Yeah.
attending and participating.
That makes sense. We have to find a way to get everybody there. And so if we can't pin it down where it's a hybrid up there, then we go virtual at first, right? Here, anchor, and then virtual, because we know how to do it from here. We're used to that, right? Yeah, makes sense. We got to do whatever it takes to get all our members able to participate. So hopefully that's a hybrid at the Hill. Member Bogus? Oh,
I have something on 7.2.
Let's see.
When and if we get there, and I just wanted to make certain that
so those are the requests for statutory change. That's our next item. Any other comment to this, or should we turn to that? 7.2?
Chair Moss, the question is that there is also back in the backup a budget overview, and I didn't know if you wanted Deputy Jones and
Oh,
others to go
sorry.
over that, or we could go to the next item. That defer to you.
I think that would be helpful, and maybe we can come back to 7.2. This is still part of 7.1, I believe, Deputy Jones. If we wanted to cover the budget overview, there's some developments there. We've been going through a process for a number of months on our own budget recommendations and requests, and we're starting to see things take shape in terms of revenue and possibilities.
Yes, so once again, Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones. To my right is our School Finance Director, Sam Uri. This, as we know, the legislative session is right around the corner, starts next week. And we've done this every year perpetually because we typically get new board members. We just want to make sure that going into the legislative session, because the first PEA meeting is where your leadership, board leadership, sits in front of Public Education and Appropriations and said, hey, here's the board's priorities. And then we also, then right after us, the governor's office will go, right? So we want to make sure that you're all oriented to and prepared for that first meeting. And then subsequently, as you start meeting weekly, we make sure that you're very well informed about where things stand with public education appropriations, your particular request, your top 10 priorities, et cetera. So at this time, and we can be as succinct as possible, if you'll call on or recognize Director Uri, he'll walk through the governor's or the comparison of your request with the governor's office as it relates to what we'll see in the first Public Education Appropriations Committee meeting.
Yes, thank you, Director Uri.
Yes, Sam Uri, School Finance Director. Pleasure to be with you. As we go through here, I'll spend the most time on the board's top 10 priorities, but feel free to ask for questions or clarification on any of these line items. So we've given for you the base items that the inflationary WPU increase is a statutory requirement, and so that 5-year rolling average of the CPI inflationary factor is 3.4%, which works out to $131 million that will automatically be added to the WPU. The public education economic stabilization account is scheduled to have $192.5 million added to it this year. You'll note that in the governor's budget, they are requesting that addition to then be used as a supplemental for 2023 for their recommendation of the $200 million towards teacher pay increases. And so that's the reason for the kind of the ongoing amount that you see there, and then the negative one-time amount. I will note that we projected a enrollment growth that is almost flat of just 90 students, and so the statutory enrollment growth amount is just $2.5 million. Moving to the board's first priority, which is a 6.6% increase above the 3.4% inflationary factor. That totals $265 million. The governor's request is 1.6% for $64.5 million, noting that they are taking the other percentage to include kind of a 10% WPU increase. And so I've kind of noted that underneath that they're kind of taking that percentage and putting it into their $200 million teacher pay increase, teacher and school specialist pay increase. Moving on to number 2, USBE market adjustments. The board is requesting just under $7 million. The governor's budget has $2.3 million with an additional $1.4 million of more targeted type increases. Full day kindergarten, USBE's number is $51.4 million, whereas the governor's budget has $40.4 million. It's theoretically possible that number could fund the majority of full-day kindergarten. USBE feels like, to capture all of the potential full-day kindergarten, that is the number that is being requested. Beverly Taylor Sorensen Arts, $9.8 million is the board's request. This was not funded by the governor's budget. On number 5, the governor's budget matches USB's request of $175 million for one-time capital needs. On number 6, the students at risk add-on. So the USBE request is to add one increment to the at-risk add-on formula. The governor's budget actually adds 3 increments, and so it totals $70.5 million ongoing. So in that regard, the governor's asking for more on that item. Pupil transportation, USBE's request is $12 million over and above the scheduled WPU increase that automatically does go to pupil transportation. The governor did not recommend funding over and above that amount that's scheduled. Number 7, USBE internal FTE needs for capacity and service. USBE's request is just over $1 million, and the governor trimmed down that request to include a few of the fiscal monitors, financial analysts, and accounting techs. The governor's request matches USBE's current ask for small district and charter school base funding, noting that USBE is addressing this item later on in the agenda today, but currently those asks do match. And on number 10, the paid preparation and collaboration hours for educators. The difference here is that the governor is requesting a one-time funding for that item, whereas USBE is asking for that to be ongoing. I can address any of the other items more in detail, but you can see a total ongoing request here from USBE at the bottom there is $858 million compared to $729 million for the governor, whereas the one-time fund ask is $190 compared to $289 from the governor. With that, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Uri. I see Member Wood.
Just a quick question on the ongoing funds for teacher salary. If they are one-time funds, who will be required to, because you can't decrease someone's salary once that one-time funding is gone. So how does that work for the next year? Will our districts be required to keep that up, or?
It's more of a where is it coming from the budget?
Okay.
I'll note that there is a requirement in statute that this program currently be funded 10% of what's in the overall stabilization account. And so that this year, that amount is already $44 million. So it's more of where is it coming from the budget rather than whether this program is going or staying. The amount is still to be determined by the legislature, the final amount, but under current statute, it will be at least $44 million.
Answer the question. Any Member Bogus?
Oh, I think there was someone before me. I'm so sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just don't want to go out of turn, sir.
I lost my tracker. Was it Member Reel first?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry.
Thanks, I really appreciate this side-by-side view. It's really makes it a lot easier to read. Question about the full-day kindergarten. On that amount, can you even like top-level summary of what that would cover and if it expands the accessibility to first year for full-day kindergarten?
Yes, USBE's request, we feel, Chair Moss, if I may. USBE's request, if we feel enables every LEA to offer full-day kindergarten. And so the combining a statutory change, we would count all kindergartners enrolled as a full day, as a 1.0 WPU. And so this allows every LEA with space in every parent request to be fulfilled.
Member Straight, then Bogus, then Lear. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Choice to Everest to chance.
Tinker Davis chance, right. We got the triple play going. Member Straight.
Yes, Chair, I appreciate what is being done by the governor for teacher salaries. I guess one thing that I'm concerned about in regards to the WPU is the WPU raises all boats. And when it comes to our paraprofessionals, our bus drivers, our lunch people, all those different things, that is where we're seeing the greatest need, even more so as far as numbers, not being able to fulfill positions. And, sometimes having that extra paraprofessional in the classroom really can assist and help the learning move forward in a better way. So I guess the biggest concern is that we're not putting enough towards the WPU, although I do see the need to compensate our teachers. They are the number one factor in the success of our students. So I guess I'm not sure I quite see the proper balance here, but that's my opinion.
Thank you, Member Straight. Member Bogus?
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to clarify my understanding of this document. Would it be, and I'm asking a question, not making an assertion, would it be a safe conclusion to draw that if we don't have the same numbers from the governor and our agency, that we stand in opposition to the governor's request?
Chair, can I address
Please,
that?
yes.
The answer to that question is no. We don't we don't provide this, nor would I, as your primary staff officer, say that it is in opposition. Why we provide it is just to do the comparisons, not to say, well, you know, the governor is opposed to us or that we're opposed to the governor. Is to facilitate the process in front of PA, because both of us have to go in front of PA to demonstrate to legislatures the distinctions. But for the most part, you can extrapolate from this that there's some basis of agreement. The amounts are different, you know, things like that. Yes, there are some things that, you know, we asked for in our top 10 that weren't proposed in the budget by the governor. One other thing I would like to add, I hope for the benefit of the group and the public, is when the governor's office goes through their budget setting priorities too, they have to be considerate of the executive agencies as well. So, you know, at that point in time, there's not really clarity in, you know, how much is available to public ed, is available to the executive branch, things like that. Although, you know, because constitutionally we have to balance the budget, right? So I don't see this as an opposition type measurement or report card, if you will. If anything, it's just to demonstrate that there's a lot of similarity in what we're requesting and you know, in the direction of public ed. But you as the board are the principal body, the constitutional office, so to speak, and we always support and go with your top 10 recommendations, so.
Okay, I appreciate that. May I follow up?
Follow up, sure.
Okay, so, and I appreciate that clarification because I didn't know it was a neutral document. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. So as I read this document, I could be incorrect, but there's no teacher raise on this document as I see it. There is number 10, paid profession and collaboration hours for educators. And that is actually something that statutorily, if I understand the bill correctly, comes outside the scope of our negotiated agreement and salary schedule. We have to apply for that. I fill out a timesheet. That timesheet goes into HR. It's funneled through the different agencies, and it's actually kind of on the side. It has nothing to do with our teacher salary, and we had to apply for it. Our district has a well over thousands of educators, and only 300 and some odd teachers, maybe 400, applied to receive those funds. And so they're actually kind of over here, which is a different conversation piece than we were having before. Can you maybe clarify that for us, please?
Go ahead, Deputy Jones, or Director Uri.
Yeah, if I may. So we need to remember generally, unless it's a specific, you know, educator salary adjustment or teacher salary supplement program, a WPU value increase is where generally those raises would occur. And as Member Straight mentioned the WPU value, you know, raising all boats. It does, the governor's proposal does address specifically teachers and other school specialists with that $4,600 raise plus benefits. But within the USBE's proposal, that amount of money still exists for LEAs to do that as they may need. You can look throughout the state at varying salary schedules and different local decisions that are made by local school boards. So the USBE's request differs in that it kind of maintains some of that local control, whereas the governor's budget really does kind of put that set amount of $4,600. Does that help answer the question? There is no teacher raise element to USBE's request.
Does that answer the question, Member Boggins?
Yeah, I see that
Okay.
with more clarity now. I apologize. I was looking at the numbers, and then I see over here to the left that it's a governor priority. Do we know what HB or SB that's coming in, the governor's request for $200 million?
We do not know that at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Member Lear and then Member Davis.
I was just wondering on the governor's recommendation for state employee compensation increases. Is that going to benefit, like, even those employees here at the State Board of Education? how broad is their reading of, and maybe you don't know this, of state employee compensation?
Yeah.
Yeah, Deputy
It'll
Jones.
help Brian,
Yeah.
for instance.
My understanding is that's for
We're
this
treated
office,
as
but
state
Director
employees
Yuri?
in the COLA, but,
Yeah, so in the notes, the 3.5 cost of living adjustment equals 1.4 million. The rest are targeted increases, and so the details of those are somewhat off the top of my head. I referenced there page 164 of the governor's budget, but yeah, it will do a cost of living increase for our USB employees.
Also.
Also,
They're
as well
considered
as some.
state employees for this.
Correct.
Chair, if I
purpose.
may,
Yes. Deputy
maybe as an
Jones.
additional clarifying factor, how we're treated as far as compensation goes. When the governor makes a request for COLA type increases we are inclusive of that. We are part of that. However, when we request things such as market adjustments to target or specific positions, we are separated from that. So that's, I think, the distinguishing factor and why you as the board see a specific request for market adjustments as opposed to our just saying COLA adjustments, because we're targeting particular positions.
Right.
Right? Okay.
But it would be, if I follow up
Please,
for just,
yeah.
it would be, the COLA amount and the targeted amount? Is it a?
Well,
is
the
it-
legislature would, if I may, Chair, the legislature would have to fund the market adjustment requests separately, right?
Right.
From what the governor is requesting for state employee increases.
But it would still be on top of that
Yes, ma'am.
increase from the
Yeah,
government?
if they funded to
If
the
it's-
amount.
if they're
yeah.
both funded.
Yes,
Thank you.
ma'am. Yeah.
Member Davis?
Yeah, last year we were asked to take some of our ongoing requests and consider shifting to one-time onlys. Are you hearing rumblings of that again? Has anyone already asked us to do that?
Chair, if I may.
Please. And then
So we had a
Member
really
Booth.
great meeting with the legislative fiscal analyst, Ben Leishman, Matt Henderson. They have a new gentleman as well that just got hired yesterday. At this point, ma'am, we have not heard or been provided any direction to change or well, look at or review where your requests are at for ongoing and/or one-time money. I would anticipate if we are going to get asked something like that, it would be during after board leadership goes forward or as part of the first PEA meeting where, we put out in front of them. I do want to make a distinguishing factor too, that 800 million total of, and Sam can correct me if I'm wrong, that 800 million that you see there is inclusive of all of your business case requests. The top 10 is approximately 400 and something million. It's about half that. Is that right? Yeah. So I just want to make sure that if you're out there and you get asked, well, gosh, you're asking for $800 million of ongoing money. Well, that's with all of your business cases considered, right? Your top 10, which are heavily weighed towards ongoing funding requests, is a little bit over 400 million, I think, or about 400 million approximately. Am I right on that? Is that on there? Yeah, so.
May I follow up?
Yes, please. And then Board Member Booth.
So I would just ask that if we do have that conversation and if we are asked that then the next time we bring this back around, it's an action item instead of an information item, so we can make adjustments if needed. And then one we may want to consider is the educator hours. That would be an easy one to move into one-time only. And maybe even if we're not requested to change it, it's something we might want to
Sure.
think about anyway to have a greater likelihood of
Yeah.
passing.
And I did, Chair, if I may, I did ask the LFA if they were aware of how much is available yet, specifically for PA, and they didn't have that information yet. I mean, it typically comes on the first day. So timing-wise, too, we're in a good position because PA meeting is on Wednesday, and then your first meeting is that Thursday after, so we'll be able to update you on, what occurred in PA, if we were provided specific direction to go back and look at things, or so to Board Member Davis's point, there is the opportunity for you to relook at things, and even on a perpetual basis because you meet weekly. So
Thank you. Member Booth.
So I was just thinking, all is not lost when we don't show up on the governor's list of what he is pushing for. We know that we have been funded in certain areas that were not recommended by the governor's office. But what is our recourse? Or what should we be doing? You know, we all know gas prices. We felt it in our own pocketbooks. When you think of our representative function of our districts, I know Nebo District, Provo City District has deep concerns about pupil transportation. I know that our USBE staffing needs are critical, and when we put in a request to be able to have additional funds to attract the caliber of new staff members or ongoing staff members that we need in various areas, it's a real need. It's not something that, okay, well, we'll just hire somebody that is less qualified. We can't. We have to remain competitive. When we see no support from the governor's office for the Beverly Taylor Sorensen, and yet we've seen what incredible things have happened over these years. What should we do to, I don't know that we can change the governor's minds, but if we're not changing that mind, where do we begin the lobbying or the providing of additional information or more specific details that would help our legislators in the process of understanding how we really feel and how those districts that we represent feel about some of these priorities and some of the ones that may not be getting the attention that we'd hope they would.
Yeah, Chair, if I may.
Please.
So my first and foremost response to any question that would be asked by any board member is trust the process. The process that we take has really resulted over the years in significant increases to public education funding. Our partnership, our respect, our continuing relationships with both the governor's office and the legislature is why that's occurred. And I anticipate that to the fullest extent possible, the legislature will support our request. So to even become more specific, that first day of public education appropriations where we do sit down in front and leadership says or provides their priorities, right after that agenda item is the governor's office that comes forward. And so then as the chairs indicate to their body, the PEA, and then to the public and to us as the board, of what's available for public education funding, then that's when, we have more of or a better idea because of the process of what is available. And then, you as board members, that's when I would recommend, just as a principal staff member and having done this for 8 years, is when that's where you take the course of actions that you would need or deem necessary to do it. The weekly meetings are essential. Angie, and from the policy perspective, it all ties in really, really well. Did I answer the question, Chair Moss?
Member Booth?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Chair,
Yes, please.
may I add something? One other thing I wanted to remind you all is the first week, next week, I can't believe the session starts next week, but we will have a breakfast on Thursday morning at 7 a.m. That's an opportunity as well. The legislative, our funding requests are a highlight or opportunity to discuss those briefly, and then an opportunity for you as board members to mingle with legislators and talk more informally. But those are opportunities for you to also talk about our funding requests. We'll have information there available. So Board Member Booth, that might be another opportunity at the legislative breakfast.
Thank you, Deputy
Thank you.
Stallings. Okay, if there are no further questions on that one, we can move to, I'm sorry, Member Straight, sorry.
Thank you. If I could just add, based on experience from last year, two of the items that I was following very closely that were both in the top 10. After we attended that first initial budget meeting with the legislature, the next time we met on that Thursday, we moved both of those requests to one-time money, and as a response to that. So as of right now, Beverly Taylor Sorensen is number 4 on our list. It'll be presented that way. We'll get some direction, and then we'll be able to adjust from there. So, yeah, not all is lost, and sometimes it's just a matter of moving something from ongoing money to ongoing. Yeah, one time to ongoing, or vice versa. And so, yeah, I think we're still in a good place and in all those areas.
Thank you, Member Straight. I'll share later. We've already been doing sit-downs with legislators to try to emphasize our priorities, and, some of those are different. It's not necessarily disagreement, but it's an opportunity for us to point out why we feel strongly about the things we voted on. So we've been doing that already, and we're all, part of that going forward. Anything else on that one, or do we turn to, sorry?
Yeah, if I may, Chair, just to really clarify and emphasize this, the legislature, by way of their Executive Appropriations Committee, has already funded or provided ongoing money in the base budget with the funding of the, and Sam alluded to this, is the inflationary increase, the 3.4%, and then the money, ongoing money in the economic stabilization account. That's 324 of your requests already. So that's a great indication. And to be more precise, your top 10 ongoing amount is 435 million. So I said over 4 million, but it's 435. So, but see, you have a large part of ongoing money already, or we do, public education system does, by way of that inflationary amount that was already passed by EAC. So, I just really think it demonstrates the legislature's resolve to indicate early on in the process of how committed they are to public ed. So, and there's going to be a lot of discussions, about the budget overall, the state budget, general fund, income tax fund. But we will make sure that, just as soon as we have information on that, we provide it to you in those weekly meetings and, as necessary and as we progress and move together. Thank you.
Yeah, and they've been very receptive and welcoming, allowing us to make the rounds on the Hill already, and they want to hear our perspective. So it's been a great opportunity. Item 7.2 then, Deputy Stallings on statutory changes.
Yes, thank you. We do not have any staff requests for additional statutory changes, so the backup that's there is just a reminder of the statutory request that the board previously approved. And I have nothing else.
Okay, that brings us to lunch. So we take 30
Member
minutes,
Moss?
right? Back at 1:55. That's what we had before. Okay. Adjourn to lunch.
Thank you.
I know.
So Chair Moss, are we coming back to this? Are we coming back to this, though? 7.2? Yeah, I had a motion on 7.2. Thank you. Thank you.
Are you ready?
No, I just called him to order for you.
I thought you were stepping
teed it
in.
up.
I thought you were stepping, all right. Let's see, do we have all board members? I think we do. There's nobody between Christie and Carol? Okay. Okay. Okay, we're back in business. Next item of business is item number 9, small district and charter school funding. And I believe this is going to be, let's see. This Deputy Stallings and,
It's Sam and.
okay, all right.
Oh.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have to go back and revisit. I'm sorry. I'm moving too quickly. We need to go back to 7.2 because Member Bogus had a light on that I neglected. So, Member Bogus.
Thank you, Chair. So I would just like to make a motion that we reconsider and rescind support for 4 in particular items on our statutory changes requests. In particular, number 4, and I can speak to the reasoning behind that, number 9, number 12, and number 14.
Hold on, let me get these down. 4, 9, 12, and 14?
Yes. And I'm happy to
Okay.
split the motion, and we can do
Well-
them one at a time, whatever you would like to do, sir.
So that's a formal proceeding if we do it, but is there a second? The motion is to rescind support for, I believe.
To
correct?
reconsider.
Reconsider, I'm sorry, okay. Reconsider our support for 4, 9, 12, and 14. Is there a second to that motion?
that.
Second. Member Green. Okay, Member Bogus, would you like to speak to the motion?
I'd be happy to speak to the motion. So with regard to number 4 in particular, having attended many of these meetings up at the legislature, the Ed Interim Committee, it is my understanding after reviewing their documents that they voted against support for this and that they would not put forth a committee bill as a part of that. And so besides the inherent issues with that, I would like to just honor their thoughts there.
Are we able to track, do we need to track any of these? Or are these going to be interlineated or more broad? Simply going to rescind? I'm sorry, reconsider and then remove support. Is that right? I'm just wondering if we
I
want to
don't have
address.
clarity on your question,
I'm
sir.
sorry, I'm just wondering if we want to address them one at a time.
We can address
or-
them one
or
at a
Are
time.
they going to be a
Well,
four-piece?
Well, she needs to introduce them and then.
Right, you want to do all 4, okay. Go ahead.
I can do it for,
Sorry.
so number 9, the USB mission and vision alignment. I think it is,
Point of order, I'm sorry, so
Member Davis?
what we need to do is make the motion, I move that we rescind, bum, 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 and then you get a second, and
think
then
we got a
if you
second.
accept the motion on the floor, then you speak to all those.
We got the motion in the second, actually, I think. unless
Yeah,
I-
we just didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The motion was to read.
Right. So I think we're back to discussion of the motion. We did have a second from Member Green on the 4.
Okay,
But you didn't, the only part.
I didn't restate it? I thought I did.
you just need to put the motion on the floor, and then everybody can speak to it.
Yeah, okay.
And then we need to see it on the screen.
Well, that's what I was wondering, if we need it up on the screen, or, I think what we did was we simply said that the motion was to rescind, I'm sorry, gosh. Reconsider items 4, 9, 12, and 14. And so there was a second to that from Member Green, and then we were on to Member Bogus to explain the basis for the motion. So you can go ahead on all 4 of them.
okay, so aside from what I view as inherent flaws with the support of number 4, the Ed Interim Committee voted against producing a committee bill. And I think we need to honor that in collaborative engagement with them. Number 9, my understanding is the lack of compliance with the legislative audit is what's produced this, but I don't think it's the job of this agency to produce and solicit legislative direction. I think that's the job of our legislators, and I think that as our Constitution is written, we're doing that backward. And I would like to see the USB come into alignment with the legislative direction as opposed to responding to a not-so-nice audit with a request for them to change the rules. Number 12 would also be one that I'll speak to in just a minute, and number 14 is also something that I understand the Ed Interim Committee did not produce a committee bill to support that, and so I would like to rescind those 4 in that section, please.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. Yeah, the motion is on the floor, so you're free to speak to all 4 of them, and then we'll open it up to other members,
She
right?
just didn't say anything. She didn't.
Right. Yeah.
I said I would go back to 12.
You're free to address all 4, and then we'll open it up to the floor.
So with regard to number 12, it would be, Okay, so I'm going to get really broad and maybe not as granular. When, as policy-making bodies, we put these things in place, how they play out in our schools is not always how we intend for them to play out. And this, in particular, this one, among many reasons, I don't think it is fleshed out in such a way that it is going to produce quality fruit inside our systems. I think that would be the high-level response to that.
Okay. Thank you, Member Bogus. Member Davis?
Sorry.
Any other speaking to the motion?
I'm just trying to go back and read through all these again right now.
Any other board member questions or comment?
Just out of clarity, these are, Chair, if I may,
Please.
these are requests for statutory changes, and we've used reconsider and rescind almost synonymously. What are we doing here? Are we reconsidering or rescinding?
I would like to remove support for all four. And if I need to split the motion, I can do that. We can vote on them one at a time.
That is a possible motion if somebody wants to present it. Anybody else have somebody wants to move to separate, they would have to do that and have a second.
I would move to separate those.
Member Green moves to separate. Is there a second? Perry seconds. And would that be to separate each of them individually or to 2 and 2, 3 and 1, each individually?
I would move to separate each one individually.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to separate.
Divide the question.
Sorry?
The motion needs to be to divide the question.
Yeah, sorry, to divide the question, thank you, between 4, 9, 12, and 14. I believe, Member Carey second. Any discussion of that motion? Okay, board members, all those in favor say aye. 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 All those against say no. Passes unanimously to separate. I don't know if do we need to count the votes when there's no votes? Okay. All right, so we've now separated 4, 9, 12, and 14. Start with 4. Any further discussion or comment to the motion to, I believe it is now rescind support for item number 4? Member Lear?
Well, I maybe need some clarification. As I understand it, this is a report we received, so maybe where's Darren? Is he here to save me a little bit? Maybe he's hiding. As I understood, this was a report that was received by the board after a year's worth of study, including many LEAs and other policymakers, to change our accountability system or redesign it. And so in order for that to happen, we have to go to the legislature. So is everything I've said so far right, correct? So to rescind this would mean we want to have no accountability system? Is that what you're saying? No, you want to just stick with the accountability system that currently exists in code?
I would not oppose minor changes to it, but I think a redesign is out of order at this time.
And by out of, and can I ask the maker?
Please, go ahead.
By out of order, what do you mean?
I think our system is in chaos, and to produce more programs, more policies, more change, more infrastructure upheaval for your educators at this time, coming out of the crisis they have come through, is, at the very least, not considering what they have been through and what they're going to go through when we install this and implement it. I think furthermore, the policy itself is not fleshed out in such a way that it will play out in our system as maybe it is intended to. And I think we need to, as a governing body, really consider our educators. They are in crisis. And I need to maybe stop there.
And
Thank you.
then
Follow
can I
up?
follow up with one?
Sure.
I would just like, maybe for all of our sort of enhanced understanding, or at least help me remember, I'm not understanding that was the purpose of this end product. And so I wondered if Darren Nielsen, the superintendent over accountability, could speak to the purpose of this statutory change as developed by this committee. Is that,
That would be
line?
helpful, and perhaps also some context and framing. This says amend sections of code. I believe this came in before we actually received it, may have been around the time. There's no specific recommendation here in item 4, but maybe
Right.
you can speak to both the substance and sort of the
and process?
procedural context of.
That'd be
that
helpful
item.
for me to refresh my
Yeah.
memory.
Yeah, Darren Nielsen, Assistant Superintendent of Student Learning for the State Board of Education. And I'm glad I have Angie here with me to keep me straight as far as the legislative request. That was made as the work was concurrently being done to develop this report on behalf of the board on redesigning a next generation school accountability system. So the request in here was established by the board and approved by the board prior to the conclusion of that report, expecting that there would be the potential for legislative recommendations that would come out of that work. I also would remind the board that the committees that were engaged in that work included members of the Senate, members of the House, some of the members of this board on the executive committee, and then a diverse group of educators, and took a lot of feedback from parents from across the state to formulate the report that's been published. The report doesn't assume that there would be action taken, but it does contain recommendations that the committee that put that together would encourage any future action around the school accountability system, that there would be consideration of those recommendations, because they believe that those, and I agree with them, they're really thoughtful ideas and suggestions around enhancing or improving a school accountability system in the state of Utah.
So just one more clarifying point. So to be clear, it didn't present an accountability system. It just said, in developing an accountability system, presumably between the legislature and policymakers, that it should, these committees recommend certain characteristics. Is that right?
Yes, that's generally correct. When you read the report, they look pretty specific, but the committee that represented them recognized that that's what they are, as recommendations with rationale that's included in the report around those recommendations.
For what a new accountability system would look like.
Yes.
Thank you. That reminds me of what happened and what came about.
Let me turn to a couple board members, and I have, I guess, one clarifying question. I don't believe we currently have a specific concrete recommendation that came out of the report, which was presented to us after this recommendation. There is no live specific recommendation that we are advocating for on the Hill, correct?
May I answer?
Deputy Superintendent, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy. I did just want to explain, if you were to vote for or against this motion, what the practical effect would be. So based on the motion that was made back in August, staff then went ahead and worked with the legislator to open a bill file. So that has taken place. And so what staff would do, I'm mostly saying this to make sure that you all support what my action would be if you were to vote in support of Board Member Baucus's motion, is I would then contact the legislator and let them know that the board is no longer interested in running a bill on this topic. I do not personally have the authority to close a bill file. I just wanted to clarify that, or to tell the legislator what they can or can't do. And I only say that because I assume that they would probably stop the bill, but it's not necessarily something that's currently in our power once we start down that road. So, and then the next question, though, that I think you were asking, Chair Moss, once we asked the legislator to open that bill file, it has sat there. We have not sent drafting instructions or asked the legislator to do anything with that bill file. And in general, and this comes from my experience of working for the legislature, is it's always nice to have a bill file there in case something comes up. Whether, later down on this, in the session, there's an opportunity or for the board to have a voice or control narrative in this area, and you do because of whatever happens during the session, you're like, you know what, we actually do want to do something about accountability now, to not necessarily close that door prematurely. But I also understand that if you all, in a lot of ways at this point, the board received that report and did not say, staff, based on this report, please ask a legislator to move down the road with those policies. I did just want to throw out that if we do ask the legislator to close the bill file at this point, though, in a lot of ways, it could be closing the door on that opportunity for the full legislature, because at this point, it's first in, first out. And if 2 weeks down the road, we said we actually do want to do something in accountability for whatever reason, that would now become bill file number 1300 versus whatever bill file it is now. So I wanted to just
Thank
share
you.
that.
Yeah, and I see this, and clarify if I'm wrong, I see this almost as the board equivalent of a bill file, which does not have a specific recommendation because it was presented and recommended before there was substance. And if we wanted to take something, this board, out of that recommendation and advocate affirmatively to fill that bill file, we would need to do that here, correct? In other words, this was not a carte blanche. Whatever comes out of that report, we have supported. It's sort of sitting there. And if we wanted to take on one or more parts of that committee report, we would have the opportunity to do that. Otherwise, nothing would happen. It would remain an empty equivalent of a bill file, right? Okay. Let me turn to questions. I think Member Klein.
Yes, I would just be in support of this motion. So that we can, I just feel like this would take us in the wrong direction, any kind of passing of a bill based on this report that focuses on non-academic subjective measures that our Portrait of a Graduate expressly says were never meant to be quantified or measured. And I feel like with our proficiency rates where they are, we need to focus all of our attention on that and move away from this area where we want to start measuring and scoring children in their in these subjective areas of attitudes, values, beliefs, character. It's morally wrong, and we need to stay focused. We need to stay in our lane and focus on academics, objective academics.
Thank you, Member Klein. Member Davis and Member Wood, I'm not sure in which order. Member Wood.
I would speak against this motion. Having sat on the Accountability Reimagined committee as the parent representative, we spent many, many hours going through, and if you'll see many of the change that the accountability system, some of it is the same as what we have. But if we don't want to close a door, we also want to respect a process. Just this alone, saying we support moving forward on something, shows that there was some respect for the process that went through. I mean, hundreds of hours of time into that, looking at how can we improve this? Not how can we take it off on an area where we don't agree on, but how can we improve it? One of those being, could we possibly remove this grade, school grade that we've been looking at? How do we get rid of that? That doesn't help our schools in the long run. But giving that option for us to be able to make changes that are better for our schools rather than closing a door. So respect a process and leave a door open. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Davis?
I was not on that committee as some of you were, so I don't have the knowledge that everybody else does, but I do want to not add more to teachers' plates. I do want to be careful of changes made, but I just asked over here and was told that over 4,000 teachers responded to a survey. 4,500? 4,500 people, half teachers and half parents, which data contributed to these recommendations. So I'm a little reticent to I just take it totally away right now. The committee will pick up some of our things, the committee will not pick up some things, but individual legislators will. So I mean, it's not like I'm totally emotionally tied to it, but I would hate to just let that opportunity go entirely if we see as the session's progressing that we really do want and need to make some changes in code.
Thank you. Member Bogus, back to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair. So as I understand it, and I could be wrong, my notes here say that the board never approved the report that came out of that committee. And the request for statutory request came actually before the report was ever issued to the board itself. And this agency, if I understand the infrastructure correctly, cannot make changes to the accountability system without changes in state code. And the current system is codified. And with respect, I think that removing this from our request is respecting the process because our Ed Interim Committee voted against opening a bill file on this issue.
All right, thank you, Member Bogus. Member Hart, Vice Chair Hart, and then, Angie, do you want to respond?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify, the Education Interim Committee received the report, just like the board did, but they did not take any action. So there wasn't an actual motion to say, let's open a bill file that was voted down. It's more that the report was received, just like it was here, and then the committee said, thank you, Darren, and there was just no action.
Thank you. Vice Chair Hart.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, this is going nowhere unless we put something into it. By closing it, let's not think about just the report, let's think about accountability schemes such as, for example, school grades. If we get halfway through the session and we want to investigate or ask about or find that there is an appetite to remove the letter grade, we, for instance, with a bill file open, could do something about that. If we prematurely close a bill file that doesn't have anything in it unless we put something in it, we no longer have that opportunity. So I want to be careful that we are addressing an actual issue that exists because that bill file is empty. And if I'm wrong, I'd like clarification. It's not just about our reports and the things that may or may not be suggested. It's also about things that are currently in rule that we are in code that we might want out. Just something to think about.
Thank you, Member Hart. Member Straight.
Thank you, and much has already been stated. One thing I'd like to point out is it seems to me that there's always bills regarding accountability. And whatever comes out in the end in the legislative process is going to be much different than any one bill file, and it's going to be a conglomeration of discussion. One of the things we have behind this is lots of input. We have 4,500 educators and other stakeholders who have given input on this. This wide range of stakeholders has spoken. We need to be flexible. We need to be part of the conversation. I would hate for us to lose our opportunity to be part of that discussion. I'd like to call the question.
I think because there are no lights, the question is naturally called.
Okay, let's do it.
Thank you, Member Straight. So the motion on the floor is that the board rescind support for item number 4, school accountability system redesign. Well, I'll read that one. That's better. That the board reconsider and rescind the previously approved request for statutory change numbered 4. All members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. No. Let's do a count. If those will, in favor, please raise their hands.
Yeah.
Board Member Klein is in favor.
In favor of rescinding, please raise your hand. 1, 4, 5. We have Member Carey, Member Earl, Member Klein, Member Bogus, Member Green, correct? Did I miss anybody? 5 in favor. And do we need to count the noes, or does that? Okay, we've got the noes recorded, those that weren't. Okay, thank you. That motion fails. Let's move on to number 9. And back to the maker, Member Bogus on number 9.
On number
Any
9.
further comment to that one?
Just very simply put, the audit in April of 2021, I believe, was 64 pages long. I did read that audit, and it did not paint this agency in a great light. And I think that the agency's response is, we didn't follow the rules, please change the rules, is just not good respect of our infrastructure in this state. Our state has an infrastructure, it's constitutional, and I would just ask that the board move to follow that infrastructure with integrity and fidelity, and not move to ask the legislature to change the rules so that we can be found compliant with the rules.
Thank you. Any further discussion to that motion? Vice Chair Hart, or
Go ahead, Vice Chair. I didn't.
Superintendent Dixon? Did you-
Yeah, just some clarification. Board Member and this, I don't know if it's a question or maybe a comment. When we engage in an audit, whether it's with the state auditor, the Office of Legislative Audits, so OLAG, or an internal audit, all of those audit responses go through our board-directed audit committee. So there isn't an agency response that's different from a board response. It is a board response. So I just want to make sure that we're clear with the public and the board about that. It's a board response to an audit. So we're not operating separately. And then, and staff did make the request based on the conversation and the recommendations in the audit, and then that recommendation was supported by the board. So Sarah Young was part of that and can speak to it more if needs be, but I just want to make sure that point is clear. Thanks.
Picture.
Deputy Stallings?
I just wanted to also clarify that the mission and vision and the goals are all established by the board. So the agency, the staff also do not establish the mission and vision independently. So when we talk about what this legislation would look like, it would be this group. It would be you all making those recommendations on changes to the mission vision, not staff.
Thank you. Member Earl and Member Klein.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification. Do we have someone actually writing legislation to change the language at this time? It was my understanding that that would be something that's done further down the road, maybe 6 months down the road or so. If someone wouldn't mind clarifying that.
Deputy Stallings?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So the legislation that I gave to the sponsor of the bill is to direct the State Board of Education to make recommendations on the mission and vision language, to present that to the Education Interim Committee in October. And then based on those recommendations from this body on what the mission and vision should be, the idea would be that the new mission and vision would be codified in code in the 24 session.
Okay, so let me just make sure I understand that. So it would be to move forward with us creating the vision and mission, and then to have that codified during the interim session. Is that?
Yes, so the state board, this group, we would work together on a draft mission and vision, and then present that as a recommendation to the legislature in the Ed Interim Committee, with the goal of then the committee making a request to open a bill file, that then that new mission and vision would be codified in the 2024 session. That's the timeline.
So one more question.
ahead.
Nothing prohibits us from doing that currently, moving forward with that, with or without a bill. Would that be accurate?
Go ahead, Deputy Stallings. Or Chief of Staff Young, sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you. So Sarah Young, Chief of Staff. So currently, we are not congruent between the established and kind of stated mission and vision at USBE, as it is then stated like within the code. There are certainly many aspects that are convergent and align, but it is not word for word in both of those cases. So because the audit directed us to work towards being able to align those two pieces, this is an action step that demonstrates the agency is responding to that audit, and just noting our process to be able to achieve the final outcome they've requested.
That
I
answer,
understand.
Vice Chair? Go ahead.
I was
Follow-
just, I'm sorry, we went in between each other. My question is, but nothing prohibits us, what we're doing is codifying that we're going to do it, but nothing prohibits us from doing that, which is probably the intent of what we're going to do this year anyways. Is that accurate?
Deputy Stallings? Or
Yes, thank you. So the one thing that I would, there we go. The one thing that we, as I listened to the discussion when we discussed this a number of months back, and due to the audit, would be to replace the language that's currently in there about the mission and vision and put in there this directive to the board to come up with a mission and vision that we would present to the Education Interim Committee. And that would also make it so that we're not out of compliance in the meantime while the board is working on a new mission and vision. So I did want to clarify that as well.
Thank you. Let's see. Member Klein, did we already cover yours?
No.
No.
Thank you.
You're on.
Okay, so I had some of the same questions, but also I know we have a different makeup on our board now than we did when we first approved this. And so what is the process for us as board members to work together to create this new vision and mission, and what will that look like? And is there anything that would, based on our pre-approval of this particular statutory request, is there any movement towards, or could there be, of the current vision and mission as it is now being codified during this session?
Somebody like to field that one, Deputy Stallings?
I guess what I would say is I don't think that this, I guess we could, if we wanted to prioritize all the work on getting a mission and vision in place over the next 2 months. My experience has been when the board established their mission and vision back in 2015, 16, 17, it doesn't go that quickly. And so I think that Board Member Klein, you asked two questions. One, could we quickly come up with a mission and vision that could then go into a bill this year? Or I heard, could we take what's currently in code and adopt it as the mission and vision moving forward? I think I heard both of those things.
No, not exactly.
Okay.
So my concern is that because we approved this, it's on the approved list, how can we be assured that our staff is not working with legislators currently to get the current vision and mission statement as they are currently written put into code?
Okay, can you answer that one? Chief of Staff Young.
Of course. I appreciate the question, Board Member Klein. So I am the individual at your office who submitted the policy change request. And I can assure every member of this board that we have not taken any action steps to be able to recommend the current language. To Deputy Stallings' kind of earlier point, we are only asking for them to ask the board to be able to take the action steps related to a process. We are not advocating for any adoption of language, current or otherwise, at this time, because we would wait for the State Board of Education to direct what that language needs to be.
Thank you. Member Davis Member Davis?
Yeah, this was one of the options in the audit. So there are a variety of things we could do. We could just say, we don't need to have a mission vision, and we're just going to adopt the things that are listed in code, and that's going to be it. And if so, we probably don't need to be here, really. I mean, they can just do what they're going to do, which is fine if we all vote to do that way. Or we can work to align the language that says we are going to be determining a mission and vision and bringing it back to them so that we all kind of get on the same page, the board and the legislature together. Or we can do nothing and just let the audit sit. But this was one of the options in the audit. So I think I may have not voted for this initially had I heard concern about the mission and vision from legislators. But every single time we met with them, bar none, we went through all of our mission, our vision. We talked to them about Portrait of Graduate. We did all of these things. And I did not hear one single legislator express anything but positive. So had I been hearing from them at all of these meetings, we really wish you would change this or do something differently, then maybe I think I would have voted for something different originally. But this, at this point, just says, let's start the process. Also, we reviewed the mission and vision in 2022, which we were required to do, and knowing that a new board would be coming on, you know, we didn't have ever 3 members say, let's change this and this and this, knowing that this board would probably like to review and maybe make some changes. And we have new legislators this year that may have different opinions as well. And so what this does is it doesn't codify our current mission and vision, but it just puts into code that we will work on this. We will bring something to them, whether we decide it's the current one or something that we change and revise, then they can approve or not approve, you know, at their leisure or do what they want to. But this feels more like a technical move than a substantive content move at this point.
Thank you. Okay. Member Bogus, can I come back to you for summary, since you're the maker of the motion, and turn to Vice Chair Hart?
Absolutely, thank you.
I just, there's another piece that I think might be unsaid, and I want to make sure that I'm clear on it. My goal is to make sure that this board is at the table when a mission or vision is created for education in Utah. And to me, this was a placeholder. This was saying, we're going to take charge of this, we're going to create this, and it really, what it doesn't say but implies is we see that as our role, not your role. So would that be true by opening this bill and moving forward on this? It really is saying we are reserving our place at the table. Okay, and ensuring that we have a voice in it. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Member Straight.
Yes, just briefly. You know, this appears to me to be a proactive action on behalf of the board to move this forward in a way that aligns with the audit and in conjunction with the legislature to where we do have that alignment. I think it would be wrong to read between the lines. You know, there might be a little bit of conspiracy, and if you start reading between the lines or wondering if something nefarious is going on. But no, I think this is simply a matter of moving forward to accomplish the goals of the audit and to put ourselves in a better place.
Thank you. Member Bogus, to wrap up as the maker.
Awesome, thank you so much, Chair. So Superintendent Stallings, if I use those words interchangeably, that was not meant to offend. I just clearly used them wrong, and I apologize. I would just ask that as we consider this motion, if it's not meant for the general session, let's just take it off the list. If it's meant for the interim, let's put it on the list for the interim. But my documents here say 2023 general session requests. And so if it's not our position as a board to put that in the general session, let's remove it from this list and put it on the requests for the interim session.
Deputy Stallings.
Yes, and so what I would state to that, it is action for this session because it would be codifying. It would be taking the section that currently has mission and vision language in the code, replacing that with language that says the state board shall produce or provide recommendations on a mission and vision. So it's essentially directing the board to take this time to come back with recommendations. And it also will signal, it'll help us hear or see that the legislature also wants that from us, so that when we come back and bring those recommendations, it's a collaborative process with the board and the legislature, then codifying the mission and vision that was recommended by the board.
Follow-up?
Sure.
So is it my understanding, would it be correct to say that we're asking the legislature to change the design? We're asking them to let us tell them instead of them telling us as it currently is?
So just one more thing I'd just clarify. The audit gave options, as Board Member Davis explained, and the audit recognized that the State Board of Education is a constitutional authority, that governs or
Yes.
oversees public education. And so there's a place for both the State Board of Education and the legislature. And the legislature could have, in one of those meetings, directed and said, the State Board, our preference is that you change your mission and vision to be that wasn't the message that I heard, or that I think as Board Member Davis said, we have not heard that as we, board and staff, have presented the mission and vision for many years, since 2016, before PEA, Education Interim, standing committees, to this president and speaker. It has always been presented favorably. Not once have we been told, did you know that there's a mission and vision in code, and why aren't you following that? So I think, of course, I am your staff, and I'm probably the biggest advocate of the State Board of Education and your authority. And so for me, for this body is the right thing to do. And it also shows respect to the legislature and their auditors that we are taking action and that we're owning this. We want to, as Vice Chair Hart stated, we want to be at the table. We want to partner with you. And if we do nothing this session, it could send a signal that we're not responsive to the audit.
All right, any further? Did that answer the question, Member Bogus?
Yes and no. I don't know that there's purpose for further clarification.
Okay.
I just would offer that if I can speak to the motion in summation, that I understand meetings have been held, and I acknowledge that and want to honor that. But I do think as a policy-making body, we just took an oath to uphold the constitutions. And there is an infrastructure in this state, and the way that those documents are written say that the legislature has the authority to direct us. And now we're asking for codified language that says we want to switch that. And I just think we need to either ask for a constitutional amendment or we need to honor the Constitution. That's what I think. And so
Thank
I would
you.
ask that we rescind support for this.
Thank you. I do have a hand up from Member Klein again, and then we'll wrap up and put it to a vote.
Okay, Deputy Stallings, it sounds like from your comment that there is language already created to change in code to express that we would be the body in charge of that. Is that language something that can be shared with us so we can see exactly what is being proposed for that legislative language?
Deputy Stallings.
Thank you. So I did send an email that I could put in a Word document and just show the request. Essentially, I stated, and I'd have to look at the email, but I essentially said the drafting instructions for this bill would be to codify that the state board shall provide recommendations for a mission and vision to be presented to the Education Interim Committee by October of 2023. I think that's the drafting, and that's essentially what would be codified. And I could, if you'd like me to, I could send that in an email, but if somebody was writing what I just said, it's essentially that.
Okay. Based on the information that has been shared here, I would support still rescinding it the way it is. I think it's important that be in the legislative hands.
Thank you, Member Klein. Seeing no other lights on, motion before the body is that board, I can just, oh, there we go. I could get close, but that's better. Motion is that the board rescind the previously approved request for statutory change number 9. Board members in favor, well, let's just go straight to hands, huh? Do we need the ayes and nays? Why don't we just go to hands and make it quicker because we are getting behind again. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Board Member Carey, Board Member Bogus, we have Board Member Klein. Did everybody? Count the noes. All opposed? We don't even need to count the noes, do we? Okay, we got 3 ayes. Okay, so thank you. That motion fails. Let's move to the next one, which is item number 12. And back to the maker of the motion, Member Bogus, if you'd like to speak to that one further.
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate you, and I'm sorry that my voice is still not at full capacity because I know it's enjoyable to listen to. So I just would offer that, again, I go back to not fully fleshed out, and I don't want to not recognize the work that goes into these things, but the state safety support of this section that we're talking about here, right here in number 12, it goes beyond. It expands things to things that are not measurable or achievable. And I think as a policymaking agency, we need to stick to things that are smart, if you will, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time-bound. And we're looking at something that goes beyond the scope of that which is measurable and achievable and to intangibles. And I think until that is fully fleshed out, support of this is premature at best.
Thank you, Member Bogus. Vice Chair Hart, did you have?
Yeah, can we get an update on where we are with this, like, other than just this sentence? I want, Dr. Norman would do.
Deputy Dr.
Yeah,
Norman, thank
Deputy
you.
Norman.
Yes, Patty Norman, Deputy Superintendent of Student Achievement. Thank you for the question. So the question comes, or the need comes from the School Safety Center, which is in statute. So in statute, it requires a group of individuals or for the USBE to house the School Safety Center. Within that, there is recommendations that come from it. This would establish a school safety specialist at every school in the state of Utah who would receive a $3,000 stipend. Oh, yeah, okay, never mind. It would just be the codification of the collaborative in order to get the name done. Yes, thank you.
Follow up?
I'm confused now. Can you just restate what you just said? What it is?
Yeah, go ahead. Okay. All right, thank you. So currently, the Utah School Safety Collaborative is a group that's broader than the School Safety Center. So the School Safety Center is codified, as Deputy Norman mentioned. There's also a separate business case and funding request that's one of the 12 approved that I think Deputy Norman was beginning to speak to. It's the 3.5 or 2.5 million. But that's not what this is. This is a separate request to codify the already existing Utah School Safety Collaborative. So this collaborative is in existence today, and it's and this is where I do think you have more expertise than I do.
I apologize. I was looking at the 12 on the other sheet as we were looking at this. So with the codification of that, it was originally prior to COVID, when that was happening, and there was a lot that was going on with school threats. And at that point in time, there was a group of people that came together and said, how do we solve this problem? It was requested by the state the superintendents throughout our district and through other state agencies, including the Department of Public Services, including Department of Health and Human Services, Juvenile Justice, parent groups, and as they all came together, and also Safe UT. As they came together, they said, what can we do on behalf of school safety? Because there was a huge need. During that time, the committee continued to meet as agencies. And at that point in time, it was decided by our board that it would not be a committee or a collaborative that is under the board's jurisdiction, meaning that any one of those, they each have their own board or governing way of governing themselves. So all of the entities would get together and they would talk about best practices that could happen, how the work they're doing combines together. And so this would just codify that school safety collaborative so that that group has the ability then to put their suggestions forward.
Thank you. Superintendent Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing I would just add to Dr. Norman's narrative, and that is what problem are we trying to solve with this codification? One of the issues that came up was confusion between the work of the collaborative and the safety center. We found that out in the field of people wondering why they weren't getting information out of the collaborative to their schools, and it's actually this center that's more connected to the schools. So Board Member Earl serves as your representative on the collaborative as part of the work of the group. So the collaborative can certainly make recommendations, and they do, to the center, and they can make recommendations collaboratively that they could even bring to this body if there were rules that they wanted passed. But the problem that we're trying to solve by codifying this is just to eliminate that confusion between what is the collaborative and what is the center. And I think that was expressed to us from the field, that they needed that clarity established in code.
Thank you, Superintendent. Member Wood.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question for Deputy Stallings. How does this related to HB 61 that's already dropped, that creates the school safety task force? Are they related in any way?
The Chair, is it okay if I move on?
Yes, please.
They aren't currently related. That bill by Representative Wilcox was actually developed by the Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice Interim Committee. But we have been speaking with Representative Wilcox and asked if he would be interested in including this in his bill as he moves forward with it, because it definitely is a natural fit, since the collaborative is about, our schools working together with our Department of Public Safety and law enforcement agencies. And so really that is what the collaborative is about, as well as our colleagues and partners in the Department of Health and Human Services.
Follow up?
Yes, please.
Are there different people on the collaborative versus the task force?
Yes, Chair, sorry.
Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
We did not advocate for or influence that bill, so they're very separate. And we've asked to now work with Representative Wilcox on that legislation and see if we could infuse this, for example, into his bill. So I do think there might be some overlap, and potentially the task force that's in there could be amended and maybe replaced with this collaborative. It also could be that they have very different roles. I think if I remember correctly, and I haven't looked at SB 61 for a bit, but the task force was meant to come up with recommendations for policy changes, which the collaborative could do. But I do believe the task force would include more legislative members, and I don't believe our collaborative has legislators that participate currently. We have Board Member Earl, but legislators are not part of the collaborative. So there could be a little different role depending on, at the end of the day, what Representative Wilcox and others want to do with that task force, because oftentimes the task force is time limited. It might just be 1 year for one purpose to influence one bill, for example, versus this collaborative is meant to be an ongoing collaboration for years with no deadline.
Thank you, Deputy Stallings. Vice Chair Earl?
Yeah, I think I'm actually confused myself now. So we're saying we want to put this into code, even though it's this group's been meeting to try to coordinate and correlate best practices for the last couple of years. Well, even probably longer than that. So I don't know. I'm having a little bit of a struggle with this, because if there's a need for something, it's good to meet and work through those issues. But once we put it into code, then we have this mandated, there isn't an end in sight if there isn't a need for something. So it's kind of a mix. I'm not sure where I'm voting on this yet, but I think I'm maybe even a little bit confused from the center versus this collaborative. And I guess this is just an organization mechanism where the other is actually providing direct services. Maybe someone could clarify that.
Can we get an answer to that one? Is that Deputy Norman or Stallings? Sorry, I don't mean to.
Yeah, and we do have Rhett Larson, who's online, if you want to ask him these questions as well. So I think that he's ready as well. So with the School Safety Center, that's what's in code, and that gives USBE those rights and responsibilities, and that's made up of USBE staff and, you know, others that go along with that. But the collaborative is made up of the broader community involving many of the state agencies as well. So each one of them has, so at the School Safety Center, we report to you as a board. The collaborative does not report to you as a board. It is its own entity because each one is has its own stakeholder group and governing entity. Within that, and to Board Member Earl, or Vice Chair Earl, if there's questions within that, that's kind of the basic difference between the two. One is codified. One is this group of individuals who have been, or entities that have been meeting for years now of trying to come up with these school safety measures, models, securities, and whatnot. So it's really to be able to define the difference between the two. One reporting specifically to USBE, and then the other is this collection of agencies, and then they would be able to have, I guess the biggest part coming from our LEAs is what authority after the school collaborative, or the collaborative, what is their ability to get that information out? And so as superintendents, yeah.
So that
Vice
maybe
Chair
that's
Earl,
my
go ahead.
question. Yeah, sorry, that's my question, because actually the last several years that I've been on the collaborative, they've made recommendations and put those forward. So I'm not seeing this as a hindrance to that. So that, I guess that's where my confusion comes in, because they're actually have been engaging with lawmakers and have been engaging with other individuals throughout the state in order to, you know, help with best practices. So anyways, perhaps that's my question, why it's necessary if it's happening, so, or codifying it.
Vice Chair Hart might have my same question. So.
I'm not sure it's a question, other than I think it's ironic that in times of crisis or non-safety, you want a clear chain of command and clear guidelines and expectations. How else could we address this issue? How could we regroup on this issue and perhaps be more prepared in approaching legislature for something in code? I get the feeling we're not really prepared yet. Is there a way for us to regroup and really have some conversation around this? My second part is, would then we want to leave the bill file open or closed?
Okay.
Deputy Stallings?
Yes, we would recommend that Rhett Larson, he's in the Zoom room, if he could answer your first questions. And I think that would be the first step.
Yeah, the work is fabulous, though it is not a question of the work that they do. It's a question of why we would need so much noise in this space and how to clarify roles, responsibilities, and organizations in this space.
Right, or did you want me to?
Well, actually, sorry,
ahead,
just
Debbie.
before, to speak to your last part, I think that the reason you have something like the task force that's in HB 61 is because the collaborative is not codified. And there are people who, we have 50 to 60 LEAs. I think the law enforcement agencies have like 600. So they even have a communication, I'm not saying it's a problem, but when you have that many entities involved in public safety, that many entities involved in education, the more we can clarify in code what is there, that might have stopped, or it might have had the Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice Interim Committee might have recognized this collaborative more. So in some ways, it actually might be a reason why it should be codified. But as to the other parts of your question, I think Rhett Larson would be best.
Rhett, good to have you with us. I don't see you online, but can you introduce yourself? Tell us your position. Is he with us?
He's not
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Okay. Well, okay, well, while you're doing that, just a quick clarifying question. Would this bill add any additional power to the collaborative or just codify its existence?
Just codify.
Deputy.
Yes, thank you.
No
It-
new power to take action?
The idea was to codify what it is doing now. And I did receive a text about the power or the reasons why we might want to codify the collaborative is because, again, it makes sure that education and the board have a seat at the table, because oftentimes these conversations are going on with a very heavy emphasis on Department of Public Safety or law enforcement mindset. I guess that's what I would say. If you look, for example, at HB 61, you would probably be able to tell that this was definitely written from the point of view from law enforcement and Department of Public Safety. Nothing bad about that. But part of the codification of the collaborative is to remind people that we do have an existing agent or a collaborative, and it does have more education partners or more education voices on the collaborative than I remember there was on the task force.
All right, I think, oh, we got
I
one
have a
behind you.
comment.
I'm sorry, Member Klein.
That's okay. I've been waiting patiently.
I apologize. You don't show up. You show up as public 3, and so I apologize.
Yeah, that's okay. It's okay. So I'm just in going back and researching on the Utah School Safety Collaborative from their own documents. It looks like they are expanding safety issues beyond the physical to the psychological safety of students, which really opens a huge can of worms. And it makes it so that it's practically an open-ended scope to this effort, and how many partners, because it talks about these public-private partnerships, how many of these partnerships are going to be brought in to address school psychological safety? And can we name each of those entities that we're planning on doing that with? The fact that we're looking at codifying this, makes it a permanent fixture instead of just as an as needed. But right from the Utah School Safety Collaborative report, it asks this, that is problematic in my mind. It says, what data is needed to be collected to support this potential legislation? Include whether this data is currently collected and available. So it's about data collection on our kids on the site. It's to ensure and provide the psychological safety of students, right? That subjective realm. And the state and its partners, by necessity, would have to collect expanded, personalized data using a survey that collects, albeit de-identified data, was never designed to collect that type of granular personal information. It was intended to collect only data about the physical safety of the physical locations at the school. And this goes back to I think it was last month, when we were approving a business case that's also on the that's on our approved list for school safety physical facilities capital needs, which I remember specifically asking, is this go into the realm of psychological safety, or is this specifically towards facilities, making our school facilities safer? And I was assured that it was only for facilities, only then to go to the Mental Health and Education Coordinating Council up at the legislature to find out that they approved of this request. And I have to ask myself, why are they approving this request if they're about mental health and this is about facilities safety? So I have so many red flags going off my mind about this that I just can't, in good conscience, support the codification of such an entity without a whole lot more answers. And I feel like we are moving into a realm that it would be better left to law enforcement than the more and more data collection on our kids for us to then justify bringing in more and more mental health and other psychological safety measures with who knows how many different public-private partnerships. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Klein. Member Davis, is your light off, or were you still in line?
Yeah, sorry, I was just trying to get clarification for the physical facilities part and the other parts, and trying to understand if this dovetailed with our safety financial ask.
We
But
do
I-
have Rhett Larson on now.
Let's hear from him so we can, all of us can get our heads clear around
Yeah,
this.
Rhett, could you, Deputy Stallings, did you have?
I just wanted to share one phrase from the backup that was in for this item in October meeting. So the board approved this during the October board meeting. I was just looking at the backup, and this is what it states. As the intention of the Utah School Safety Collaborative is to remain focused on safety issues as they pertain to the physical and psychological safety of Utah students in schools. The Utah School Safety Collaborative meetings are facilitated by USBE. I just wanted to clarify that I can see in the backup that it does talk about not only physical buildings, but also psychological safety of students. And there's a lot more. I just pulled one phrase, but if you look at the backup, it is not strictly about buildings. And the other thing it does state at the bottom is what data are to be collected. And it clarifies that they'd be using the school climate survey and incident data reports, which are already existing data elements. It does not state that it's going to ask for additional or new. It's just clarifying the data that they currently would be using.
Thank you. Rhett, can we bring you into this conversation? Just introduce yourself and address a couple of the questions if you've heard them, or do you need us to reframe or rephrase the questions?
Yeah, so Rhett Larson, School Safety Specialist for the Utah State Board of Education. Just real quick for a mic check. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. So first of all, with school safety, as we look at school safety in prevention, intervention, and postvention, school safety is very comprehensive. The School Safety Collaborative serves as like a stakeholder group of broader, if you look at those who serve on it, it helps us to gauge, stakeholder feedback, as well as help share where we're at within school safety measures as we learn with and from those in our state and from other states. The school safety climate survey, the climate survey that we have, that is already in existence. The collaborative does not oversee the climate survey. The collaborative, again, serves as a stakeholder group. And when we look at school safety in a variety of terms and in different lenses with physical or psychological safety, when you look at the School Safety Center itself, we have members from the Department of Public Safety, the Office of Substance Use and Mental Health, Utah State Board of Education, and we also have a member of the Huntsman Institute Safe UT program. So when we look at school safety, we bring together the experts around the table and have those conversations. Where are we within school safety? What are we learning with and from other states? What is the best practices around the nation? School safety is continually changing. For example, there was a lot that was taken away from the horrible events that took place in Uvalde, Texas, at Robb Elementary. We continue to learn, and we want to be able to share best practices through a variety of lenses. But again, the collaborative serves as that stakeholder group, and USBE does conduct those meetings and oversees those meetings. And it really has been beneficial in sharing best practices, bringing professionals around the table. And if it were put in other agencies' hands, those other agencies would determine the direction of the collaborative. Might look a little bit differently, could look a lot differently, but it really has served as a beneficial body of information all around the collaborative in general. I hope that helps answer some of the questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. Any other follow-up questions from board members or comment? Back to Member Bogus, the maker of the motion, if you'd like to sum up and address.
All right, thank you, Chair. So, Superintendent Stallings, I have a couple questions for you. So, as I listen to you speak, this is Representative Wilcox's bill. No, so could you clarify that for me? Because his name was mentioned, but then I got confused because his name was mentioned.
Yes.
So could you please clarify that for me?
Be happy to. And it came, sorry, Chair.
Yes, please.
It came in response to Board Member Wood's question about whether SB or HB 61 and this were the same. It is not. After HB 61 was approved as a committee bill by the Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice Interim Committee, we, if you listen to the audio of that committee meeting, Representative Wilcox acknowledged that there would be additional work on the bill and that it would be amended, and that he would be welcoming in or inviting others to the table who hadn't been there. So we previously weren't at the table as part of that explicitly or directly. We weren't influencing that legislation, I should say, that was going on in the committee. So after that committee meeting, we reached out and let him know about this, the collaborative, and how it could be part of his legislation. And he said he was open to talking to us about the collaborative. So he doesn't have a bill file specifically on this. Because he is the lead, in a lot of ways, I would say the House is looking to him as the chair, the House chair of the Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice Interim Committee. We felt that this would show good faith partnership for us to work with the leaders, or him as a leader of that committee, and to bring education's voice to that conversation and see if he'd use the collaborative and put that in the bill. It's that helpful. It's not as straightforward as others where we've asked for a bill file. We don't have a separate bill file on this. We were hoping to work and get it in Representative Wilcox's.
So you're piggybacking into his bill. Is that a correct understanding?
You can say it that way.
Okay. May I follow up?
Yes.
Okay. So this, I think maybe some of the confusion is in the future, and this is maybe just a Christina thing, if we had links to these bill files, that'd be super helpful. But my concern is that the scope is so broad. And I've read Representative Wilcox's bill, and I've actually had the random opportunity to meet with people just walking by who were discussing that very thing. And to me, these don't marry well. I like what he's doing. I like the unification of the language across agencies, interagency things. But to me, this collaborative doesn't marry well with what Representative Wilcox is doing, because it opens the scope for things that are intangible and not measurable. And I think it would be really hard to codify psychological safety of a child. That seems to me to open the door to some interesting things. And then I guess that would be it. If you have any comments, I'm happy to listen to clarifying comments.
Response, Deputy
Yes.
Song?
Thank you. And so we will, in future meetings, if you look at legislative materials for our Thursday meetings, we will actually use this document and put in there the bill files. So for example, number 2, right now it says refile 2022, but we will put HB, I can't remember the number of Representative Tusher's education false claims bills, but it's I think it's at HB 127. We will absolutely do that. As they are numbered, we will put them in there so that you'll see, oh, this number 3, for example, is HB 16. We know that. And I actually have it in our document already put there, but we were going to start using that format for our Thursday legislative meetings. So that will be in there. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a couple more comments. Vice Chair Earl and then Member Davis.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to think through this fully. So we would be codifying exactly what the collaborative would be doing, and it would be in that realm that's been addressed with the psychological in different areas. Is that right? Or is this just the members that would be attending? And then, anyways, I guess what I'm looking at is whether if this wasn't codified, we would still continue with the collaborative, and we would be maybe more flexible is the word, I guess, in meeting the needs as they arise for school safety, trying to look at best practices. That's what to me, that's what it's been in the past, is as those needs arise and as we have more best practice, we'd continue with that. I'm just trying to understand if the codification actually is beneficial, or if it ties us to obligations that maybe are not as flexible.
A question for, I see Deputy Norman. Yep.
Yes. So right now within that, Representative Wilcox's bill didn't have education at the table. And so within that, I guess what all of you need to decide as board members is, do you want that codified, that USBE has a place at the table when talking about school safety? And so that's a part of the reason why is, who is that? So in effect, Representative Wilcox's would replace the School Safety Collaborative. And so that's why it's a good fit to be able to say, we already have the collaborative that's working together. This is who's at the table, and maybe there's some differences of adding members or what that looks like. So this just takes what's existing and what's working and doesn't create something new, but then also guarantees USBE a spot at the table.
Thank you. Member Reel.
I think this has been a wonderful discussion, and I think that I'm really grateful for all of your input and all of the research, and I'd like to call the question if we're ready.
Does that require a second?
Board Member
Remind
Dave?
me. Yeah, okay. So the motion on the floor is to call the question, which would mean for new members that we proceed to a vote without further debate. So, Member Carey, is there a point of order?
I just have a point of information. Did
Okay.
everyone get a chance to speak that wanted to speak?
Typically, we go around quite a while, and then if somebody brings a motion to call the question, then the board members decide whether there's been sufficient. I'm sort of explaining, but
So there's no one waiting to speak?
Well, I was.
Member Davis has a light on.
Oh, well,
So just as a point of clarification, and Sybil can explain, that typically, if there are no lights on, we just vote. If there are lights on, somebody might call the question. Yeah, there is a light on, so that's out there, and so folks can vote yea or nay. So vote is to call the question. All those in favor, raise your hands, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Sorry, I'm in favor of
6,
rescinding.
7, 8, sorry, you. Member Booth says yes.
I'll call the question.
Did we get I think Sybil got it.
Happens.
Can we ask the noes to raise their hands? Anybody vote no? Okay. All right,
Did not vote. Those are no's.
okay. But the motion passes, so the motion then proceeds to a vote, and the motion is that the board rescind the previously approved request for statutory change number 12. Members in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Sorry.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Do we count? Let's raise the hands. I just need to go straight to hands. The ayes are.
Sorry.
Okay, all those in favor of rescinding? That motion fails. Okay. On to item number 14. And
Sorry, what was the count on that vote?
7 to 8 or 7 to 7? 7 to 8. We do have a full 15 still? Okay. So 7 in favor, 8 against. Okay. Back to number 14. The motion there was to rescind the board's support for item number 14, teacher evaluation. Back to the
Chair.
maker, Member Bogus. Did you have, yes, Member Klein?
Chair, can I motion to take a 5-minute recess?
Well, can we make it 2? Yeah, if you'd like to just excuse yourself, we'll just, we're pretty far behind, but we won't proceed to a vote in the next 5 minutes, I don't think. I assume we're going to, it's safe to say we'll probably have some discussion. And board members, I'm mindful we're 2 hours behind, but this is an opportunity for especially new members to jump in. So keep in mind, we are behind, but that's the choice, to have some discussion. So make the choice if you want to stay or move it along, but I think it's valuable. So Member Bogus, do you want to speak to this one, number 14?
Yes, sir. Again, I just want to acknowledge the work that has gone into this and acknowledge too that the ad interim committee, and if I'm correct this time, they took no action on those reports. To be more clear and fair and sporting. And I would just go back to, once again, your teacher workforce in this state is tired. And more changes for them is not healthy. And for those that don't know, I work in 6 different buildings among over 100 educators. And I just, beyond the granular level of this, more systemic change is not healthy right now for your educators. And I think we've got a good design system in place. Could it be better? Yes. But a complete redesign is, and even substantial redesign, I think is going to produce upheaval and cause more resignations than it limits or prohibits.
Thank you, Member Bogus. Discussion of the motion. I see Chair Davis, Vice Chair and Member Davis.
Thank you. I'd like to make an amendment. I move that we engage in a pilot with one large, mid, and small LEA using recommendations from the Teacher Evaluation Redesign Committee, adding one principal-directed goal. And I'd like to speak to the motion.
And I'll
Is there a
second that. I'll second
from Member Straight has the second. Member Davis, go ahead if you'd like to speak to the motion.
Yeah, I think some good points have been made here. And, you know, this is a big deal, this teacher evaluation redesign. And from everything we understand and all the input we've been given, this would actually make things much better for teachers. But I don't think we know for sure. And to go whole hog this fast is a lot. And big changes all at once. I think we should try a pilot year with the recommendations from the redesign committee, considering we've had a lot of input from these folks. See how it goes with these different sized LEAs. I'd love to see a charter as the small LEA or a charter that chooses to come on board optionally. And then we also heard from superintendents that they would like, that the feedback was that they hoped that when we looked at this redesign, the one piece I think they thought was missing was that there should be at least one principal-directed goal along with the teacher self-chosen goals, because there might be school goals or things that teachers and principals are working on together. And I personally felt like it was a fair request. But again, I'm not ready to go 100% in any given direction. I think with a biggie like this, we should try a pilot first, work out some of the, find the pros and some of the bugs, and then decide 1 year from now if we want to move forward with a full redesign.
Member Straight.
Yes, thank you. I agree with that approach. And, you know, as we've went through this, I still have a few nagging questions. However, I like our direction. And I think we need to keep moving towards that. But I think taking a little bit of pause, still maintaining the direction and gather our data. And because I know I have a few questions in my mind. I don't want to go over those right now. But yeah, I think this is a reasonable approach, and it keeps us moving.
Follow-up, Chair.
Yes, Member Davis.
I do have a question, though, in this, probably a question for our AAGs or our staff. Does that need to be codified?
Deputy Stallings.
Because the evaluation already is codified.
Yes, thank you. And yes, there are elements in code that in order to engage in the pilot that of this, we would need exemption from. And so one thing we were just talking about, we had already actually discussed having this be a pilot in lieu of a full systems change. And one of the things we would recommend is that we not codify 3 LEAs, but allow the board to establish the parameters of that pilot, because it may be that we have 5 or 6 that want to participate and not just 3. And that was the only change. But yes, there are sections of code that we started to identify that would need to be waived, and so that they could engage in the pilot. Otherwise, they'd have to do 2. The pilot LEAs would have to do the traditional educator evaluation and the pilot. We need the authority for the board to to waive those sections of code for the LEAs to engage in the pilot.
Without objection from the chair, I would change the motion. I think you stated it might belong to the body, but if you're okay without objection, I would.
Please clarify, yeah.
I would be willing to change the 3 LEA to optional, but I want it optional. I don't want to force anyone to do anything. That it would be designated by the board rather than
So-
deciding right now it would be these 3.
So if that was a friendly amendment, can you just restate? And then we'll have further discussion. It would authorize the board to,
May I add, so
is it up there now?
May I ask that we scroll that to the top? Vice Chair, your head is in the middle. Yes, thank you.
So with the pilot for the statutory change, all you really need is the permission for the board to establish a pilot that exempts current evaluation from that pilot. I would recommend you leave your full flexibility by just asking for that board flexibility and not designate any of these right now so that you can make those decisions together as a board around how many LEAs we want to accept, here's how many are interested. Do you want one principal directed goal that is not the current framework model? So things like that to be able to be discussed and make those decisions on your own. But the statutory language, the easiest option for you as a board would just to say, give us the permission to do this, and we'll figure out the nuts and bolts of it at the board level.
Thank you. Could you introduce yourself?
Yeah,
We didn't
sorry
do
about
the
that. Jennifer
formalities.
Thronson, Director of Teaching and Learning.
Thank you. Okay, we've got member, let's see, I think Vice Chair Earl was up first, and then member Lear, back to member Bogus.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Are we already able to waive the code on this? No, we can waive board rule, but not code? I mean, we already have the flexibility if someone requests. Right?
Deputy Stallings?
Yes, we do not have the authority to waive Utah code. The State Board of Education has the authority to waive their own administrative rules.
In
Okay,
this case,
thank
the
you.
code doesn't give us the authorization to waive. That, I
Correct.
guess,
That's
more
what-
I see.
tighter question, right? Okay. Member-
Okay, and then.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just had one other question. Let me see what I wrote down here. Is the language for this already written? In other words, is the bill written?
Deputy Stallings or Director Thompson?
We are in the midst of that. We met this past week, and then we meet one more time near the end of January to finish the draft language. It's very minor changes to do this pilot option, because it's really just giving you the flexibility to choose to allow a different way that would be based on that educator growth framework that you would further define in a rule. So it's not a lot of changes right now. I think we've changed 3 sections of code, proposing 3 sections of code, and that's just to say, to waive the annual requirement for evaluation, because in this model, it's to give more flexibility for the board to require.
Deputy Stallings?
I just wanted to clarify that when she says we changed, Director Thronson's been meeting with a stakeholder group, and they've been creating an outline that would be what we would provide to the legislative drafter to say, here are the sections of code that would be waived. So I don't believe anything has actually been drafted. The bill language hasn't been drafted yet. It's the stakeholder group has been reviewing the sections of code that are currently in Utah Code on evaluation and saying, this section would need to be waived, this section would need to be waived. And then what we would codify is that the state board, through enactment of a board rule, would codify the criteria for the pilot. And also, the code we have already stated would be voluntary. All LEAs would voluntarily participate. No LEA would be required to participate.
Okay, thank you.
I
think
would
had-
make a
Sorry,
motion
Vice
that
Chair
we-
Earl?
Yeah, I
Are
just
you-
make a
go ahead.
motion that we postpone until there's additional information made available, and maybe that's next Thursday. I think without seeing the language, I'd have a hard time continuing to move this forward.
I think that,
Point of order.
sorry, hold on, yeah. The motion's on the table is, go
point of
ahead.
order.
Sybil, I'm looking for a ruling from Sybil. Okay, so that motion is not currently in order to postpone, because we got the other one. Okay, so we've got Member Klein, Member Lear, and Vice Chair Hart. Go ahead, Member Klein.
Okay, so my, it the actual draft language came to our committee in law and licensing, I think in November, when Jennifer Thronson presented it to our committee. We were given an opportunity to look through the bill language. And so I'm not sure why it's being said that there isn't anything drafted yet when we were given it to look at before it was presented even to the Education Interim Committee. So our committee has had opportunity to read through that language, which I found highly problematic. And and maybe you're referring specifically to new language that would just codify a pilot program instead of the original draft language for a complete redesign of the teacher evaluation. Anyway, my other point is that we all know that pilot programs are used to get the camel's nose in the tent. And once that camel's nose is in the tent, it never goes away. It's just used to gather more data on the to push for why it needs to be made a universal program or entrenched systemically. So I would speak against that pilot program.
Thank you, Member Klein. Member Earl, I believe. Lear.
You guys have this like dyslexic problem with our names. No offense.
We've all done it. We've all swapped
right.
you.
I support Member Davis's motion. I had concerns about I felt like it was a very speculative document that we read. I had concerns about that. I appreciate this approach. I liked some things about the document we read, and I thought Jennifer Thronson was very forthcoming in terms of what she wanted to do, or not what she wanted to do, what the stakeholders she was working with wanted to do, which I really appreciated. I liked the direction away from some punitive measures toward teachers, but I also heard some concerns from the field that some of the HR people I talked to wanted something more substantive that they could use with teachers. So I think there were a lot of concerns. I would not speak for everyone and say every pilot program is not any nose under any tent. I think sometimes it's just a pilot program. And I think there's no better way to explore how effective it might be, especially if you have a variety of LEAs. And I'd love to see a charter included in the whole statewide effort to improve teacher development and training. And I think that would be a really telling piece of information. So I support Member Davis's motion to have a pilot program, and I like leaving it with the board to design what that program would look like.
Thank you, Member Lear. Member Bogus, you're in line, but in the interest of time, can we turn to the others and come back to you to address everything and
Yeah, I
sum
just
up?
had a couple questions before we vote on Member Davis's motion.
Oh, we're not going to vote yet. We'll come back to you.
Okay.
Oh, you go ahead.
Well, maybe this is for Thronson? Okay. So, Ms. Thronson, so how would this increase teacher workload? Because presently, the evaluation process is quite cumbersome. So are we going to see a decrease in teacher output? Are we going to see an increase in teacher output? And how much training are teachers going to have to go through when their administrative unit volunteers them for this pilot program? Because the beginning of the year training is already at an all-time high. I just kind of wonder if you can touch on that for us, please.
May I speak to that, Chair?
Yes, please. Thank you,
Okay.
Director Thompson.
Dr. Jennifer Thronson, Teaching and Learning Director. So specifically on this one, with what we'd be putting in the statute, it would just say this optional, and then the board would choose what that looks like in terms of teacher load. The design that we came with in November, and to go to Board Member Klein's point, we discarded that whole draft and have started over. So just so you know, what you saw in November is no longer in place, because to go with a pilot, you just need a few lines to allow that to happen, and then the board can design what that looks like. The intent of the stakeholder group that built the educator growth framework would be for teachers to identify one or more goals, depending on what the LEA or the board would decide, based on the Utah Effective Teaching Standards, and pick one of those standards to grow in. And they would identify what growth would look like, what evidence they would provide, and then they would work on that throughout the year. So it's basically just a personalized professional learning approach for that educator. So they might say, I want to work on my teacher clarity. I want to provide learning intentions and success criteria at the beginning of my lessons to help my kids know. Here's the evidence that I've done that. And that is what they would produce to kind of demonstrate their work on that standard. So currently, most teachers don't do, there's not a lot of lift in terms of they're being evaluated through observations. And so it's just quality teaching when they get observed. This would actually require them to kind of have a plan in place and to collect artifacts of evidence. So it actually might be a little different load, but a more meaningful load is the intent of the changes, is to really say to the teacher, where do you want to grow? What would it look like to show growth in that area? And then you would demonstrate that with a kind of, here's my artifacts of improvement in my goal area that I've identified with my principal.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, small follow-up?
Quick follow-up, sure.
Okay, would it be possible to produce language that any district or LEA opting into this pilot must put it through the shared governance system so that their teachers have input on whether or not they even want to engage in the process?
That would be up to the board in this case, but absolutely in terms of, in the way that evaluation's been done in the past, there was a joint council that was required, that the LEA had to have teachers, principals, and somebody else on it, families, I believe it is, parents, in on the process. And so you as a board could define who needs to be involved to approve this pilot protocol in each LEA.
So should the code pass, we could do that in board rule?
Yeah, because the code change will just be saying, some people are going to do what we have in code, and some people have a choice to do the board's pilot program. And then in a few years, and honestly, the first year would be the intent with, if the board approves, planning. Just give the LEA a year to plan what this would look like before you move it into teacher practice. And the LEA might say, we want to pilot it in 2 schools. They don't need to pilot in their whole LEA either. So we have Uinta School District that's piloting this, I believe in 4 of their schools, a very similar model, and they're having great success and getting calls from teachers not in those schools saying, why don't we get to do it? So I think there's some positivity, and that might be a great school district for any of you to reach out to. They have a growth-oriented model that they've been trying to pilot. And so they've got some evidence that this is working. It's a little different than ours, but there's a lot of commonality. And so teachers are actually seeing this being a more meaningful piece to the work.
Thank you.
Okay, Member Davis and then Vice Chair Hart.
How did they pilot it without a waiver from the code? Are they doing it in addition to the code requirements? Are they really?
Dr. Johnson?
Man, that's a lot.
They're doing their best to meet the current and doing this. So they are not necessarily in full compliance, as most of our LEAs, given the audit, are not in full compliance with the law.
Okay.
So I don't, yes.
Because that information would be really helpful. And then since we've already had some teachers doing it, we could get some feedback as to, does this make more sense for me than what we've done in the past? And then if this pilot were optional participation, then that would really help kind of determine how quickly LEAs came on board. And anyway, I think we do need to do something, because I think our teachers have a lot, and I'm not sure that it's 100% meeting the needs of everyone involved.
Vice Chair Hart.
Yeah, I quite frankly think that we have to consider the whole environment of what teachers are dealing with right now, and districts. We know licensing and the different paths districts are dealing with, and administrators are dealing with that load. They're dealing with a funding cliff of ESSER money. They're dealing with shifting populations, and maybe some districts lost some students, and that'll affect their funding. They can't staff their positions. We know teacher mental health, student mental health there's some issues there that hadn't previously been there. We've approved some standards. I do not feel like we're ready right now for changes to licensing to teacher evaluation. I don't feel like we've fully baked an idea, so to speak. I'm very worried that this isn't our best product moving forward, even for a pilot. I think that a lot of things have changed in the last 3 years. And even if you surveyed teachers 2 years ago, and then you survey them now, I think you're going to get some wildly different results. I'm really concerned that we go and change things only to need to change them again in a shifting, I mean, it just feels as an educator like the ground is shifting underneath you. That's not the time to be testing new things and testing. It doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be changed, improved, altered, more responsive. I just worry very much about the timing, even as someone who believes very wholeheartedly in giving feedback to teachers that's robust. I have a pit in my stomach about learning a new system and meeting new requirements and training teachers on expectations and changing the language. And it's just a time to be very, very careful with our, we need to make sure that teaching in the classroom is robust, and that needs to remain our number one focus. I understand that feedback to teachers is a large piece of that, but I think we need to be careful of the entire environment that we have our teachers operating in. It's just a caution.
Member Davis and then Member Norton.
I move to postpone this whole topic to the February 2nd meeting, to give us time to talk with teachers that have been piloting this, to give us time to visit again with superintendents who suggested a pilot in the first place, and to understand better their concern about adding a principal-directed element, and to really give our new members and some of the former members an opportunity to revisit again the recommendations from the committee and understand who was involved in contributing those.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. And the title of the motion was long enough that I think it spoke to the motion. I'm construing that as the motion itself.
That was my
But
fault.
do
I
you want to
spoke
speak? No, I'm-
before you got a second or put the motion on the floor. That was my bad.
That was just the description of the motion. Do you want to speak to it, though?
No, because I just did.
Fair enough.
Inappropriately. I
I've
apologize.
done the same thing. Any discussion on the motion? Member Straight.
Yes, I appreciate that. Gives us another month to look at it without, because I don't want to postpone or put it off or delay it any more than possible. And I think this is a way forward to gather more information.
Member Norton, would you like to speak to the motion to postpone?
I would like to speak to the motion. As a teacher who works in an LEA that has evaluations for our teachers done by our principals, I don't think they're all bad. I am one of those teachers that feels those shifting sands. I am overloaded and overwhelmed most of the time. But that evaluation helps me to focus on current standards. It helps me focus on best practices. It helps me have a more open communication with my principal and get on the same page, or, help we help each other understand where we are. So I don't want this to be a time where we think evaluation is a bad word. Evaluation is not a bad word. Evaluation is good, it's helpful, it's healthy in our education system, and I think it does bring about better education. So I want us to get to what's right. And I think this postponing will help us possibly get to what's right. But, I do want it to be made known that teachers are more than able to handle a well-structured evaluation.
Thank you, Member Norton. Member Hymas.
Yeah, this is more of a clarifying question. Does this motion replace the amendment? Can you help me get to the,
my
if we
understanding
vote
is-
for this, what happens next and what happens next? We have three things on the,
Yeah, my understanding is it would postpone the entire consideration of number 14, correct?
so
Yes.
if it, If it failed, then we would go back to the
Go back
amended
to
motion.
The amended motion,
And if that failed,
go
we'd
back
go,
to.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, the underlying motion. All right.
So point
No
of
further.
clarification,
Oh, Member Vargas,
I
sorry.
just want to clarify. So is it going to stay on this list, or are we going to rescind it pending our next action?
If it's postponed, it would stay on the list until we address the until we address the motion to rescind in February, assuming that comes back.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so the motion on the floor from Member Davis is to postpone action on the request for statutory change to number 14, that the board postpones action on the item until the February board meeting. All in favor, please raise your hand. There. Member Klein, did we have a?
No, I'm a no.
Okay. What was the, okay, number of 3 noes and 12 yeses. So that motion passes, and that item will be postponed for consideration at the February board meeting. Okay. Thank you, members.